The morning sun bathed the village in golden light, and the air carried a rhythm of drums, claps, and laughter. From every dusty path, families poured in, dressed in their brightest cloth, carrying baskets of fruit, jars of honey, and handmade gifts. Children ran barefoot, chasing one another around the compound, while the elders sat on mats, waiting for the ceremony that bound tradition and family together. At the center of it all sat the young mother, her eyes glowing with both exhaustion and pride, cradling her newborn swaddled in soft fabric. Her heart pounded with joy as she listened to the songs sung for her child, praises rising to the sky like prayers. Women surrounded her, humming lullabies and sprinkling flower petals, while the men prepared the drums for the moment when the baby's name would be declared. The father stood tall, smiling with pride as neighbors embraced him, congratulating him on the gift of life. Yet beneath his proud stance flickered a storm he kept hidden behind his smile. Still, this day was for celebration, and the shadows would wait. The elder of the village lifted his staff, and silence slowly swept through the crowd. The baby cooed softly, almost as if sensing the weight of the moment. Today, the elder's voice rang out, we give this child not only a name but a destiny, a place among us, a blessing from our ancestors. The crowd erupted in cheers and the drums thundered, echoing through the valley. The mother's eyes welled with tears as she leaned forward, ready to hear the name her child would carry forever. What no one knew was that this joyful beginning was also the first step toward a betrayal that would shatter the family's peace. Her smile glowed like sunlight, yet inside her chest, her heart beat with a rhythm of fear she could not silence. The women around her sang and clapped, fixing her jewelry, praising her beauty and admiring the baby she held. She nodded, laughed softly and even joined in their songs, but every joyful note pierced her ears like a warning. She knew that once the elder spoke the child's name, whispers could begin, whispers that might tear her world apart. 4 nights she had lain awake, staring at her child's innocent face, wondering if anyone else could see what she saw. The curve of the baby's nose, the sharpness of the eyes, features that didn't fully resemble her husband. Her mother-in-law had already hinted once, narrowing her eyes and muttering that the child carried a different look. The words had almost broken her, but she smiled it away, pretending not to understand. Now, as the drums beat louder and the villagers prepared to gather, she felt her palms grow damp. What if someone noticed? What if the wrong person spoke? What if the ceremony, meant to be the happiest day of her life, turned into the moment her secret escaped into the open? She clutched her baby closer, kissing the soft forehead as though sealing her silence with love. Please, she whispered under her breath, hidden by the songs and the noise. Let this day pass without truth spilling out. But the truth has a way of finding its voice, even when a mother prays for silence. The crowd leaned forward as the elder bent low, his wrinkled lips brushing the baby's ear, whispering the chosen name so that the child's spirit would be the first to hear it. Then with a proud voice, he rose and announced it to the gathering. The drums thundered, women cheered, and the air filled with dancing and joy. Everyone clapped, everyone except the father. His smile froze halfway, his jaw tightening as he heard the name echo across the courtyard. To the villagers, it was only a name, a beautiful blessing tied to the ancestors. But to him it carried a weight. That name, why had his wife insisted on it? It was the very name of a man he had once suspected, a man she swore meant nothing. His eyes drifted toward the baby, and for the first time he looked past the soft swaddling, past the delicate coos and studied the child's face. A flicker of doubt pierced his heart. The shape of the lips, the curve of the brow, something stirred in him that he could not explain, or maybe something he did not want to admit. The laughter of the crowd seemed distant now, as if the entire world had moved away and left him alone with the thudding of his heartbeat. He turned to his wife who was laughing with tears of joy, but he saw something in her eyes, just a flicker, a shadow she tried to bury under her smile. He knew that look. He had seen it once before, the day she lied about where she had gone. Suspicion tightened around his chest like a rope. He forced a smile for the guests, nodding at their blessings, but inside a question was growing louder. Is this child truly mine? At first, the courtyard was filled only with the sound of drums, laughter and prayers. The baby's new name was being sung over and over, carried like a blessing into the sky. Then, somewhere in the back of the crowd, a voice spoke, quiet, almost hidden. Just a murmur. She gave the child his name. It was barely louder than a sigh, but those standing close stiffened. One woman gasped softly, another leaned in to hear more, and in seconds the whisper leapt from ear to ear like a spark falling into dry grass. The name belongs to him, not her husband. Did you hear? She chose it for a reason. It cannot be a coincidence. The music grew fainter as people exchanged glances, murmuring behind cupped hands. Suspicion spread faster than the songs. The father felt the shift immediately, the change in the air, the way laughter seemed to falter, the way eyes began to turn toward him, then toward his wife. The mother, still rocking the baby, caught the sound of her own name tangled with another's in the whispers. Her chest tightened. She smiled wider, trying to mask her fear, but the whispers kept growing louder, sharper, impossible to silence. The elder lifted his hand, urging the crowd to continue with the blessings, but the damage was already done. The truth, or what sounded like truth, was no longer hidden. It was moving through the crowd like wildfire, and it was only a matter of time before it reached the father's ears. And when it did, the celebration would never be the same again. The celebration was at its height, drums echoing, women dancing in circles, children laughing as they chased each other around the compound. The elder was blessing the baby, his hands raised to the sky, when suddenly the singing faltered. All eyes turned toward the entrance. A man stood there, tall and weary from travel, dust clinging to his clothes. His presence alone quieted the courtyard. He was not from this village, yet something about him felt familiar, unsettling. Slowly he stepped forward, each footfall heavy with purpose. The father rose, confusion and irritation flashing across his face. "Who are you?" "This is a family ceremony." The man's eyes didn't waver. They locked onto the baby in the mother's arms. His voice was calm but carried a weight that silenced even the children. "I have come for the child," he said. Gasps spread through the crowd. The mother's grip on her baby tightened, her face draining of color. The father's fists clenched, rage flaring in his eyes. "What madness is this?" the elder thundered. "You have no place here." But the stranger took another step forward. "I have more right than anyone here. That child carries my blood." The courtyard erupted into chaos, shouts, accusations, disbelief. The drums had fallen silent, and so had the laughter. The mother's secret, which she prayed would remain buried, had just been dragged into the light by the very man she feared would never return. The joyful naming ceremony was no longer a celebration. It had become a battlefield of truth and betrayal. The elder raised his staff, his voice rising above the hush that had fallen after the stranger's arrival. Tradition demanded the name be spoken, no matter the tension that had gripped the air. Slowly, deliberately, he turned to the baby and lifted his hands in blessing. "This child," he declared, "shall be called Kamal." The name rang out across the courtyard. For a heartbeat there was silence. Then almost at once, the silence shattered into gasps. The drums did not follow. The dancers froze. Even the children stopped their games. For the villagers, names carried history, bloodlines, and memory. And Kamal was no ordinary name. It belonged to a man from their own village's past. A man whose story was whispered in shame and forbidden to be repeated. A man who years ago had betrayed his own brother in love. The father's face hardened, his eyes snapping toward his wife. "Why this name?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp. The mother swallowed, her throat tight. She had insisted on the name, claiming it came to her in a dream. But now, with the villagers staring, with the whispers rising, she could feel the ground giving way beneath her. Some murmured, "She chose it on purpose. It cannot be coincidence." Does the stranger know why? The stranger at the gate gave a bitter smile, as if the name itself was proof of what he had come to claim. The baby lay quiet in his mother's arms, innocent of the storm his name had unleashed. But to everyone else, the joyful celebration had turned into an accusation written in sound, a single name carrying the weight of betrayal. The courtyard trembled with voices, songs rising again, though weaker now, as if the celebration itself was struggling to survive the tension. The elder urged the villagers to continue with the blessings, to drown out the whispers with prayers for the child. Women raised their hands, men nodded solemnly, but unease clung to every face. And then it happened. From the edge of the gathering, a voice rang out, not loud at first but sharp enough to slice through the chants. "Stop pretending." The drums halted. Heads turned. A young man pushed his way into the center, his eyes burning with a mixture of anger and sorrow. He looked straight at the mother, his chest heaving as if he had carried this burden too long. "I cannot keep silent anymore," he said, his voice cracking but clear. "The child, he is mine." Gasps tore through the crowd like thunder. Some covered their mouths, others stepped back as though the words themselves were fire. The father froze, his jaw clenched, his fists trembling at his sides. The mother's face went pale, tears springing to her eyes as she shook her head desperately, whispering, "No, Please? The man continued, his voice louder now, unshaken by the stares. She told me it was a mistake, that it would remain a secret. But how can I stand here and watch another man raise my blood, while my name is buried under shame? The blessings had stopped. The songs had died. The villagers no longer looked at the baby with joy but with pity and judgment. The father stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. You dare to speak this here? On this day? The young man met his gaze without flinching. I dare because truth cannot stay buried forever. And just like that, the naming ceremony, the day meant to honor life, had become the day that shattered a family's honor forever. The moment hung heavy in the air, as though even the sky itself had gone silent. The stranger's claim, the whispers, and the lover's confession all swirled like a storm, and in the middle of it stood the father, his pride broken, his face a mask of disbelief. He stared at the baby in his wife's trembling arms. Only hours ago he had looked at that tiny face with love, imagining a future filled with laughter, lessons, and legacy. Now, every feature felt like a mockery, a cruel reminder of betrayal. The mother's tears streamed freely, her lips moving, begging him to listen. It was a mistake, she whispered. Please don't believe them. But her words rang hollow against the weight of the confession. The father's hands shook as he took a step closer, his eyes burning into hers. Tell me, he demanded, his voice low, almost broken. Tell me the truth, whose blood runs in this child? She lowered her gaze, unable to answer. And in that silence he found the truth he dreaded. His breath caught, his chest heavy as if stones had been placed upon it. Around them, the villagers murmured, their pity and judgment slicing deeper than any knife. The elder tried to calm the storm, urging them to remember the sanctity of the day, but it was too late. The father turned away, his body trembling not with weakness, but with the unbearable weight of betrayal. The drums that once beat for joy now felt like echoes of mockery. The name that had been given felt cursed. The child, innocent and unaware, lay peacefully in his mother's arms. Yet for the father, every heartbeat of that child was a reminder that he had been deceived. The betrayal had unfolded. And nothing, not even tradition, could sew the pieces of trust back together. The courtyard no longer felt like a place of celebration. The laughter, the songs, the rhythm of the drums, all had died, leaving only the weight of accusing eyes. Women who had just sung for her child now whispered behind their palms. Men who had congratulated her husband now shook their heads with pity and disdain. At the center of it all stood the mother, clutching her baby against her chest as though the tiny heartbeat might shield her from the storm. Her husband's stare cut through her like fire, and the lover's words still echoed in her ears. She tried to speak, to explain, but her throat closed under the pressure of shame. Say it, the father demanded, his voice trembling with fury. Is it true? Her lips quivered, but no words came. The silence was answer enough. Gasps rolled through the crowd like thunder, and suddenly the space around her felt colder, harsher. The women who had stood beside her now stepped back. The elder, who had blessed her child, lowered his eyes. Even her own mother-in-law turned her face away. Her knees buckled. She sank to the ground, dust clinging to her dress, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. She pressed her baby close, rocking as if the child could still be her only comfort in a world that had turned against her. Please, she sobbed, her voice cracking. I made a mistake, but do not take my child from me. But no one stepped forward to comfort her. Not one hand reached to wipe her tears. The villagers stood in a circle, their silence a judgment louder than any curse. She was alone, torn between confessing the full truth or clinging to lies that could never save her. Her tears fell onto her baby's face, mingling with the dust as she whispered again and again, forgive me, forgive me. But forgiveness was not hers to claim anymore. The courtyard was still. The songs that once soared with joy were gone, the drums abandoned in the dust, their skins silent. What had begun as a celebration of life had twisted into a trial of shame, and every villager bore witness. The father stood apart, his face like stone, staring not at his wife, not at the baby, but at the ground, as if even looking at them would break what little strength he had left. The mother knelt in the dirt, her tears soaking her child's blanket. The stranger and the lover both remained at the edges of the crowd, their words already spoken, their damage already done. The elder raised his hands once more, but even his voice faltered. This was to be a day of blessings. Instead, his gaze swept across the family, sorrow heavy in his eyes. It will be remembered as a day of curses. No one sang. No one clapped. The villagers dispersed slowly, their whispers filling the air like the hiss of snakes. Some shook their heads in pity, others muttered in anger, but all knew this story would linger in every home, retold again and again. A warning, a scandal, a stain that could never be washed away. The mother rocked her baby as if trying to hold on to the only piece of love left to her. The father turned his back, walking away with heavy steps, each one a reminder that the bond they once shared had been severed. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the storm, but the curse of the ceremony had already taken root. What was supposed to unite the family had broken it forever. The music that had opened the day never returned. Only silence remained,